Hello and good afternoon, everyone, and present over here. My name is Armin Chopra, and I'm the co host for this fantastic session on the topic EdTech, Edutainment, and Play based learning to leapfrog progress in education. We have our three respected speakers in the panel and one moderating today, and would be discussing and giving their views on the topic. Before further ado, I want to invite our first speaker on the panel, who has 18 plus years of global IT industry experience at TCS, Oracle, and Infosys across 10 countries. He is co founder and managing partner at Uzurba. Please welcome Mr. Vincent Toscano.
Hello, everyone. Thank you.
Our second speaker in the panel comes with a vast experience of working with government and CSRs. He is founder, chairman, and CEO at Fuel. Please welcome Mr. Ketan Deshpande.
Hello everyone, thank you.
Our third speaker in the panel has 25 plus years of corporate experience. He is CEO and founder trustee at Open Links Foundation. Please welcome Mr. Sanjay Dalmia.
Hello.
Our fourth speaker, who will be moderating this session, is the founder and CEO of LifeLab, which makes science education fun and engaging for children and builds the capacities of teachers to create experience based learning environments. Please welcome Mr. Levitt Somarajan. Now, I would like Mr. Levitt to take over the session from here.
Thank you, Armin, so much. So I was reading one article, which was a research from the Brookings University, that by 2030, half of the young people today who will be reaching the adulthood won't have any skills to thrive in life or in work. So this topic of edutainment, edtech, and play-based learning to leapfrog education is much more relevant than any of the in the time before. So in that context, I would like to invite all the three eminent speakers today, Vincent, Sanjay, and Ketan, who will share the deep and vast experience that they have in this sector. So with that, I would open the floor for Sanjay to just, if you can, in a 5 minutes, if you can just throw some light about your work, about your background and your entrepreneurial journey so far, it would be great. And then Ketan and then Vincent.
Sanjay sir, you are on mute.
Hello everyone, I am Sanjay Dalmia. Last 4 years I have been in this field, education and edtech. It's absolutely new to me and it's been a rocking journey trying to learn about the education sector. I did my education from IIT Delhi and I am Ahmedabad. So I thought this will be easy, getting into education and, it should be 4 hours of work and many hours of my retirement. But it's the other way around. Actually, education is a very complex sector and there are a lot of opportunities, but there are a lot of challenges also. So before I get into that, after my education, I worked in the corporate for 25 years. I was with some large banks at the beginning till about 2000, and then there was this big internet boom, and I jumped in as part of a startup called CashTech, and we were into banking technology. We made software for cash management, which we sold in many countries around the world. 55 countries, 56 countries was the last count. We got sold out to a Israeli company, and I continued there. So this happened long back. I continued there. 2016, I thought, I will retire and I will do something social, and education appeared easy, and that is how I came into education. So the challenge is, the way I saw it, I thought, there is so much technology happening outside, and, on WhatsApp and computers, there are such excellent models and materials available. People are talking about 3D and they are talking about visual reality, and but in the classrooms, things are completely missing, and how could we bridge that gap? And that was the journey for me where I started. We wanted to make something like Wikipedia, which we are still attempting for teachers, because I believe that 95% of students are driven by teachers. They're not driven by themselves. No one wants to study. Why should they study? I mean, it's very boring. I also didn't want to study in that age. Afterwards, I was very driven. So I thought, if we can somehow empower the teachers to be exciting, and that would be a big change. And who is an exciting teacher? An exciting teacher is someone who has great content with them. So, you have a great joke to tell, for example. You can deliver like Amitabh Bachchan. So you have great delivery skills. And you can create a relationship with the children. So all those are required to be a great teacher. And we said, let's try and address one part of it, which is, collect all the jokes and give to the teacher so that, they can tell all the jokes and make the class interesting. So that is where we started. Like any other startup, I mean, this is like any other startup. So, there is nothing social about it. The only thing is you don't get paid and you have to work very hard to make it happen. But the education system, which has been set for almost 300 years by Britishers, sometime in 1700, the Britishers came to it with a missionary zeal. So they wanted to put up an education system which was different from the gurukuls that were set up, and they went about it. And they put in a lot of effort to make it happen, a lot of missionary work. It will not change easily, and we will have to put, at least 1/3 or 1/4 or 1/5 or 1/10 the number of years to make a change if you are not happy with what is happening right now. So it's a long journey, and it requires lots of perseverance. It requires a lot of effort. But I believe there are lots of opportunities also, because there are so many challenges. There are so many opportunities, both for profits and not for profits, both for people who are in the long haul and people who are in it for short term to make, a presence felt or make some money in it, which is important, making nothing wrong in making money. So it's an exciting sector. We will see significant amount of work, So like internet happened in 60s, and then, in 2000 was a real boom. So we will see significant opportunities in the sector in the coming time. A lot of work needs to be done, which is a good thing. So is that a good enough introduction, Louis, about what is expected, and can I pass it on? I think that's a message from me. Lots of opportunities, a lot of work. Louis, you're on mute.
Thank you, Sanjay. That was very relevant, and especially in the context of 80% of the MHRD education budget goes to teachers' salary. And unless we empower and build the capacities of the teachers, the educational transformation is next to impossible. So, with that context, over to you, Vincent. So, if you can just share a brief about your journey and your work.
Surely, Levitt. Thank you very much. I'll try to give it short. So just as a background of my journey, I grew up right here where I'm seated, in this island village called Shorao in Goa. I say it's still one of the last remaining paradise, as part of Goa. So I was fortunate that way. In education, yes, I was a village topper in SSC with my very humble score. But subsequently, I struggled in science with calculus, and as a result, I failed twice in 12th. And thanks to my illiterate father, who put me for a 6-month computer programming course at an institute in Panjim called DataPro, learning programming and realizing that I, the gouty boy from this village of Goa, and twice failed, in 12th, could be the boss of this super expensive computer. This is 1990, so you can imagine it was exorbitant in those days. So that I could be its boss was life transforming for me. And that is what got me back on track as far as studies are concerned. And I went on to do my diploma in Polytechnic in mechanical. Topped at all Goa once again, went on to do my BE in mechanical. As you know, by this time it was around 1997, so Y2K was in, full flow. So everybody from agricultural, chemical, mining, mechanical, everybody was taken by the hordes. And I was one of those, I should say lucky ones. So I ended up at Tata Infotech Pune. Then the journey was standard, and I spent 18 years in the IT industry. And over the years, when internet came about, when Wi-Fi and then mobile, broadband connectivity came about, there were times when I would be leading a 100-country implementation for my company, Infosys, in later years. And when I would come down here for holidays, I would have to go up the hill and connect to the towers in Panjim, and I could still be at work, connected with my teams across the globe and 5 offshore delivery centers. And that opened my eye that IT is one thing that we can take in terms of livelihoods. We can take it to the villages rather than drag and deplete the villages, dragging all the people to the cities, including myself as I had experienced. So that opened my eyes, and that's where I started thinking that I should do something about it. And out of that was born this company called Uzurva, which means Uzo and Fury, positive energy in my Konkani language, Uzurva Technologies. 5 years back, when I left my job and started, the work here in Goa, I realized that how fortunate I was in 1990 versus the unfortunate kids that we have in school today. Because 72% of computer labs of our state, as per national statistics, do not have a single functional computer, which is a tragedy in the 21st century. So every year, some 17,000 kids, go through SSE. You can be sure most of them hardly know anything of computers, essential for their life in the 21st century. So that is where we began this initiative called Goans Empowered with IT 5 years ago as a social work. And we started reviving computer labs using Raspberry Pi. And then subsequently, we made it a commercial offering to CSR. Then in the last year and a half, we started crowdfunding. And with that, we have done 27 schools across Goa so far. Okay, and now with this infrastructure falling in place, with the government authorities acknowledging that this is a viable solution rather than the expensive Intel and other hardware, we have had a curriculum revision as well to the state board syllabus as far as computer education goes. And now we are taking it to the next level in terms of Goa to Mars kit, through which using the same hardware, Raspberry Pi and MIT Scratch, which kids by now are familiar with, we want to teach them robotics and automation, all of that. So we have an exciting journey ahead. Thank you. Levitt, you're on mute.
Thank you, Vincent. Your work is extremely relevant for the empowering the children for the future skills.
Thank you, sir.
And with that, actually, I would like to invite Ketan, who has been extensively working in the skilling. So, Ketan, if you can just touch upon your work of the last, 13 years now. It's been.
Yeah.
And also like how, and continuing that, actually, I would like to, take up this discussion ahead with you. Starting with you on like where do you see the relevance of the skilling, especially at this point of time?
Sure. Thanks, Levitt. I think we had an opening batsman from IIT, and I am with Sanjay there, and then we had Vincent, who shared a fantastic story to take to be as a career path. And here, my story is quite relevant to both of them, where I suffered a opportunity loss and I could not appear for a national entrance exam. And that triggered me to actually start Fuel, write book on career information about different careers and entrance exams. And I was just 19-year-old by that time. I still want to remember that age so that I know that I'm still young. And I want to make this judgment that we started this organization Fuel called Friends Union for Energizing Lives, a group of friends coming together just to create awareness about different entrance exams and career opportunities. And what it transformed in last a decade or so is it has become a full-fledged organization now working with almost 3,500 schools, 1 million youth outreach, and so on. The scale is, of course, over a period of time and over learning from slogging things. Things were not as good as it looks now. We started from a humble journey. Had to meet the school principals 10 times before they gave you appointment to even do a free program, accept all the insults which are there, make those changes in your pitches, and then go back and again say that, okay, we are here to help you. But what in this process made me learn was critical things like how do you empathize with your students. Sometimes your own students don't want your help, but still you want to give help to make them understand that you are there for them. So that really was an inspiration. During this journey of fuel, I happened to meet Dr. Kalam, who was my inspiration, and who told me that if a person who dies gets 4 people to carry out his rituals, a young person like you can definitely get more than 4. And that's how the journey carried on. I got few mentors in the process, like Santosh, who helped me to take it further and escalate the mission. As we speak today, on through online, around 3,000 students are taking training in future skills like artificial intelligence, IoT, big data, digital marketing, all from rural government schools wanting to expand their careers, make job opportunities reach to them. That's what we are doing. On the other side, we run a scholarship program to support them to complete their graduations, all farmer children, auto drivers, and so on. And on the other side, we also have a platform where we link them to job opportunities, and which can be taken by any students, whether they are privileged or underprivileged, and get their help to get those opportunities of internships and jobs. So the model has evolved over a period of time, and we have tried to implement those. During this process, what I think our topic is relevant is adopting technology in making effective use of your connections and network, and taking that one thread from your connection and going forward and implementing it. I think that's what helped me. Collaboration with government also helped me a lot, because it's very difficult to collaborate with government. That's what normally is said, and it is difficult to work with government, but if you crack it, then it's not difficult, it's easy, so that you can actually make the difference on the bottom of pyramid and you force multiply it. That's where I collaborated with some of the young policymakers of our country. They invited me to their constituencies. They arranged all the principals, colleges, students together, and made me address all of them, and that's how we could force multiply our outreach. Similarly, related to CSR and impact funding, what we could get is, if you solve small problems, then show them that you could solve the smaller problem, and then ask for a bigger problem solution is better. So for example, a bank asked me to work in Assam. Before that, I had never gone to that geography, but had I said no to them that time, probably I would have not been one of their strongest partner today. So it takes a lot of time to create that footprint for your social entrepreneurship journey and to create that impact funding. So that's a brief about my journey of Fuel and what I'm trying to do across the sectors in career counseling, skill development, and scholarship space. Coming back to Livid's question, it's a very interesting time of COVID-19. What's the role of skilling going to be in this sector? And I was speaking to few forums. Some of the sectors are badly affected, related to aviation, travel and tourism, which we all know, automobiles. What is coming out is adjacent skills. So somebody who is from travel and tourism might be good in terms of his customer service skills. So can he shift to adjacent skills which are available for him? And I think identifying those adjacent skills with the prior experience which that person has could be a possible alternative. But nobody thought COVID-19 would make such an impact on the jobs, opportunities, and skilling. Social distancing now in conducting classrooms is going to be a big challenge. We are not ready for it. In terms of technology adoptions, on one side, I was thinking that technology adoption would be much higher, and it will really help all the tech providers. But there is also a feedback that since the competition has increased, because all our teachers who were not on tech have suddenly come on tech, so who will use their tech content is also a question mark. So that is also a challenge which many of tech providers are speaking about. And the other part of it is, yes, mobile phones, smartphone penetration, and how do we make sure that that reaches to everyone in the government school would be another big challenge for everyone to address. Reverse migration and migration jobs, I think government is trying to do a lot. Today itself, there was a news about 50,000 crore package for the migration job skills. But how do we give them those jobs? Government has planned for around 140 days, 150 days, I think. Beyond that, what happens, we don't know. And there can be a spike in the wages also in the bottom of the pyramid. by which even the migrants will come back. That is also a possibility. So with considering all this, I think globally also, if you see, our capita income was, I think, around 2000 USD currently, and China's is 9700 USD. So there's a much gap for us to do it. Can only government alone solve all the problems? No, we as startups, young entrepreneurs, we have a huge opportunity to make it happen. And on the positive note, what I will like to note is Roti Kapda Makan is one of the slogan given to us, but can it be skills, entrepreneurship, and healthcare for the next decade? That's what we will have to look at it, live it. And with this opening remarks, I pass it on to the moderator to take it further.
Skills, entrepreneurship, and healthcare. That's a great point, Ketan. Ketan, you touched upon a very interesting point of the empathizing with the beneficiaries and the stakeholders, especially when actually they themselves are not convinced about, whether they want to take it or not. But we want to give it. On that note, actually, I would like to, ask Sanjay, especially because you are working in the edtech space with the teachers in the classrooms, that is like the foundational basis. So how we solve that puzzle, Sanjay?
See, it's very complex. These are habits which will not change rapidly. So we have to acknowledge that. So absolutely right. I mean, we want to give something, but do they want to take it? Are they ready to take it? And they may not be wanting to take it for various reasons. I mean, they genuinely don't have time. They genuinely don't have capability. There are many other things that they have to do. Maybe, they are interested in their children, their work. Maybe there are so many government reports to be sent. So, few things there. How will adoption happen? One, like all technologies, there will be early adopters. And those early adopters will typically come from the affluent part of the society. They will not come from the lowest end of the society. So, if I look at my experience, I sat in a product review of cell phones in 1993. I don't know which company it was, but they were asking people, would you adopt a device which is this big and which doesn't need wire and which will, which you can talk with anywhere, and it will cost you 8 rupees a minute, something like that. There were 20 of us. And I remember 19 of us said no, including me, that why will we adopt something like this? I mean, it seemed, why would you spend so much money for something like that? But it did create a revolution. Now, everything may not go exactly the same way, but the point I'm trying to make is, if I look at the phone journey, the people who had phones early on was, the early adopters, either people who had to be in the field or people who could afford it easily and not worry about it. So this edtech problem is a big problem because, on the one hand, there is so much technology outside the classroom, and on the other hand, in the classroom, it is broken for many reasons. I mean, even if you put a computer in the classroom, what do you do with the computer? Do you have exciting content to show? If you have a computer, do you have a projector? If you have a computer and a projector, how does the content come on the computer? Will the teachers carry it on their pen drives onto the computer? So, there are many steps to this very simple problem which are incomplete and which have to be solved. And it will be solved, but it will be solved gradually. So it will be like burning the ends of a matchstick. So we will solve some parts of it, and some parts of it will remain unsolved for a long time, and gradually, they will get solved. It will take time. I mean, we have to keep finding niches where this is possible to make happen. So, for example, we have found a very good partner, Bharti Foundation. They have about 200 schools, mostly in Haryana, Punjab, also in 4 other states. Why are they a good partner? They are a good partner because they are a private enterprise. They are run as a foundation, so their budgets are limited. So it is good that their budgets are limited, because it tells us how it should be in a low budget place where there are 200 schools, and how do we make an implementation and make it work in a place like this. On the other hand, we have partners like DAV Chennai, which are like high end, and they are very happy, and they are already even without asking, wanting to give grants because they feel it is aligned with their mission and they should do something. But those organizations are different. We need them because they will teach us something. So we needed their teachers to do the review of all the work that we have done. But we also need the Bharti kind of team. There is a Teach for India network, which you people are from Luvit, and many. I saw on Ketan's profile that many people from Ketan's organization are from Teach for India. So that is again very interesting because exactly the profile who will not just use technology but push technology into the system. And how do we work with these kind of people and such organization and such individuals who will help us to move things forward? So it will not be an easy solution. We will have to look at it from many different aspects of trying various ways of seeing, how do we take it one step further in a 100-step journey. So it will still be just one step further. It will not be like taking 5 steps. It is still one step. It's such a large segment. It is such a large number of stakeholders that obviously things will move slow. They will not move fast. So how do we work with various stakeholders? How do we align with people who can make things happen? Who may be like-minded is one thing, but who can make things happen because, our ways can match and make things happen. So I think that's what we are trying to do. And I feel that's what, any startup or any business would also try to do.
Thank you, Sanjay. The key insights was identifying those early adopters who can make things happen. So that has been an interesting point across both the spectrums, and that's a great point. One side you have actually partners like Bharti Foundation, and one side you have partners like DAV. So it gives a lot of insights in terms of fine-tuning the model. That brings me actually, Vincent, that's an interesting point, and that it seems like you have made some inroads into it with a very complex work that you're doing, especially with convincing right from the parents to the schools to the principals to the government stakeholders who may not have ever heard about the Raspberry Pi. So how are you making those inroads?
Again, I fully agree with Sanjay sir. It's not an easy journey. I think even Ketan mentioned earlier, extremely difficult to change the mindset that prevails in our education system. And I think beyond a certain point, we should stop blaming the British and anybody else. And with due respect to those sentiments, okay, no doubt, they exploited us, absolutely exploited us, manipulated us to their advantage, no doubt about that. But that's history. I think 70 years we are independent. What have we done? Even if we haven't done, what are we doing today? I think that is what we need to focus on. But specifically, if we look at this picture, okay, from let's say the parents' point of view, because for me in this whole picture, the parents represent the society in a way, because they are like the primary customers. It's their children's future. Okay, so if you look at it from their perspective, I believe the current parent generation that we have, they are in this transition. It's a transition generation. Meaning, like even in my lifetime, I have seen from nearly no electricity in my village to the very first, landline-based phones coming, wherein you have to book a call by calling an exchange and so on, to where we are today. Okay, so a lot of parents are still struggling in terms of understanding technology. See, overall now in this picture, if you look at the the convenience or difficulty level of life or hardships in India, okay, compared to the West or to the developed world, okay, here the inconvenience is extremely high. Okay, and that is where we see a lot of our Indians, they seek a convenient or more comfortable life abroad. Okay, however, there are, not everybody has the choice. Okay, and there are some, I would say fools like me, and maybe some others here too, who make that choice, saying that it is incumbent on our generation to carry the burden or responsibility rather, and like the Japanese have done with their country, we need to lift our country and our nation out of a current situation, work on making the changes. We can blame, let's say, generations before us, and we can say, okay, we count on the future generations, but I don't think the ball passes us and goes to somebody without it touching us. So definitely our generation today has the responsibility to be the change agents. And this generation, will make a difference in terms of where our country goes. Now, coming back to the parents, given the hardship level in our country, Okay, parents, I think, look at education as a cookie cutter approach, hoping that the school management or the board and the teachers, they'll take care of at least that particular responsibility of their life, so they can continue with the struggle for their livelihood. Okay, they do not have the energy to put that much time and focus into their children's education aspect. So we send our kids for tuitions and so on. And this is where comes the gap. So as a result, parents remain unaware as to what is crucial for their children to be educating about, to be learning about today. It's not what it was for our times when we were in school. Things have changed. Just like, irrespective of whether somebody becomes an engineer or whether somebody becomes a poet, a student has to still learn ABCD, still has to learn grammar, still has to learn maths. On similar lines, today, learning basic logic and essential basic fundamental coding, okay, using tools like MIT Scratch, is mandatory or should be mandatory in a school, but it is not yet. Because our children who are growing up are growing up into citizens of a technological era, technological world, but are we preparing them? They are not. Even engineers who are coming out of our institutions, national statistics say some 80-85% are non-employable in the industry. What a colossal waste. And are we really going to get anything out of a demographic dividend that we like to think as an advantage, if this is our skilling or education or learning level of our kids? So definitely parents need to be made aware. They need to be woken up, because most parents are not. Urban parents might be, but India is not urban. 600 lakh villages, if I have it right, or 6 lakh villages in India. Okay, 70% of our population resides in our villages. The future scientists and great minds of a country are going to come out of our villages. So it's essential that we take this awareness to the parents in our villages. Make them understand that they need to demand that their school teaches coding and gives exposure to the latest technology to their children, just like they are being taught to read and write, just like how they are taught to do math. So also they should be taught to do coding. Not to make programmers out of them, but for them to understand how the technological world works. The logical thinking foundation or computational thinking foundation that we will lay in doing this, okay, will ensure that they will be better citizens as well, because logic applies everywhere. Critical thinking, spatial thinking applies in other areas beyond programming, in the field of arts, in the field of architecture, and so on. Okay, so that is what is needed, and for our kids to learn it from experience by doing things themselves. Now, this is where we have the next challenge in terms of cost. General perception is that technology, computers, robots are expensive, but really not the case today anymore. It may have been, let's say, a decade back. Today, you have this device called Raspberry Pi, a small pocket thing, okay, pocket-sized computer, which can be used in dual mode, can be used as a desktop, can be also used as a programming platform for robotics automation. And all of these can be done with drag and drop visual programming platforms like MIT Scratch. Children, when they are in 5th, 6th, can build the foundation of logic and their appreciation and understanding of how the simplest form of robot works, so that they can relate to it as they grow up. They can build their aspirations, especially in our villages. Due to the brain drain we have had, there is a severe drought of role models for kids to look up to. So if I talk about my state, irrespective of your perception of the world, the way the world perceives, in our villages, we are devoid of role models and inspiring role models for our kids. So most of our kids tend to, want to become someone wherein they won't have to use their intellect. So either a driver or a cook or a waiter, or maybe a government servant, a clerk in some department. That is what aspiration is by and large. That's not going to raise a country out of our current situation. So we need to inspire the kids at that level, and to make that happen, if we use low-cost software, low-cost hardware like a Raspberry Pi, or free open source software, FOSS as we call it, wherein there are no licensing costs, then we are drastically reducing the cost involved in bringing technological awareness and education for our children. And that is something that needs to become integral to our education system. Yeah, Levit, back to you.
Thank you, Vincent. And it's an amazing point and an interesting also for the future. The computational thinking should be like the new ABCD of the world. So with that, actually, Vincent, I would like to ask one more question. When you touch upon this, it's a very interesting point that you made, that it needs to be low cost, and it is very relevant in a country like India, where almost like, there are 440 million school going children. So can you just, give a tangible number to that, how low cost this can be and how scalable this can be at low cost? So that
Sure.
understanding by the organization, CSRs, government can be really high.
Yes, definitely. And again, without too much focus on what we are offering, but just to briefly mention it, we have created this kit in the last 6 months called Goa to Mars. You might be wondering why Goa to Mars. It has the intent is to change this entire aspiration that our school kids have, for them to aspire and be aware of what Elon Musk is doing, where humanity is headed. It's not that we are abandoning Earth, but we need to aspire big so that at least we'll land somewhere in between. When I was little, when I was in school, inspired by the UGC programs on astronomy, I used to dream that one day I'll be an astronaut. At least in the process, I became a mechanical engineer, but certainly not a clerk or anything lower. Okay, there is dignity in all kind of work. I don't mean to demean anything, but purely from an aspirational point of view. Okay, so looking at the cost, the solution that we offer, if you look at it, it comprises of some 30-40 components, all of which are readily available and cheaply available online, okay, on Amazon and other platforms. Okay, simple elements which when combined with the Raspberry Pi allows you to learn robotics without having to wait to go to a college and pay lakhs of rupees. If this level of advanced technology is within the reach of our kids at a village level, then it is a colossal wastage if we don't exploit this opportunity. Now, if we talk about price point, from our point of view, with the material and 10 hours of training and equal hours of remote support that we offer, we are charging just 40,000. I'm sure many other entrepreneurs in India can, in their respective states and district do the same, and we can have like a national movement wherein at such low price points, we can bring the latest technological exposure to the remotest of our villages, because Raspberry Pi can run off a power bank. You don't need to depend even on your electricity supply. Okay, so these are the low price points. And see, another point to note is many times we think and feel that probably this problem is addressed in the form of adult tinkering labs. See, adult tinkering lab requires certain minimum number of students in a school, like 400 or so. Okay. Also, I think the setup is quite premium and quite high end. Now, this is not possible in each and every of our schools in our villages. Okay. So for that, we need to go in for low cost solutions like this. Okay, which can be done within 30-40,000. And with that kit, using that kit, okay, today we have prepared a list of 20 different experiments or projects that the kids can do. Then we are bringing in an advanced level. I'm sure other startups, other entrepreneurs can do the same, and we can have a national revolution. I'm looking
Thank you. Thank you, Vincent. With that, my last question to Sanjay and then Ketan. Where do you see the next 2 years, especially in this era of the post-COVID world? What are the different opportunities for the NGOs and the CSRs equally, or the philanthropic foundations and the governments to solve this puzzle? If you can touch upon it, would be great insight for aspiring entrepreneurs who might want to work in the skilling space, the edtech space, the edutainment space equally. So Sanjay, where do you see the opportunities?
See, I feel COVID has changed many things. So, we got a lot of attention because we had the same partners early on also, but the same partners, teachers are spending a lot more time with us because they are forced to now. And I think this will continue. One of the things, which schools are exploring is what does a blended model mean? Because that is not going to change rapidly in the next 6 months, 1 year, or even 2 years. No one is sure when. How to use technology and what does a blended model mean like? So if only 20 or 30% of the children are going to come to the class, what will that mean? And how to use technology and how to use the spaces. And very early days, I don't think schools or teachers even thought about it. One of the good things, so there is a question which I'm also answering to. One of our partners, which is Bharti Foundation, works only in rural areas. And they have about 200 schools in 6 states, mostly Punjab and Haryana. So I feel one of the big learnings that we are looking forward to is, what does this blended mean? What does it mean to work in places where the technology infrastructure is low. And what I hear them saying is, maybe there are 50% of the students who have access to technology, who have access to plans and have a phone to work with. There are another 30% students who can do something about it, and there are 20% who will not be able to do anything about it. Do we create a digital divide, or is there a solution? So that blended model, does it mean that the 20% who don't have only come to school, or what will the model look like, and how will they blend? So I feel we will see a lot of exploration and a lot of experiments around how to make education work in this very exceptional time. And I feel that will also set a path for the future, because difficult time will teach us to do things in a very efficient way, which otherwise we wouldn't have tried. So I feel there will be lots of opportunities around EdTech. There will be lots and lots of opportunities. It's very difficult to say how they will pan out, but there will be opportunities around the technology itself, opportunity around content, opportunity around data analytics and AI, opportunity for new teachers to get into place, because a lot of the teachers don't have the skills which may be required to do many of these things. So this online world is a little different from how teachers operate, and the teachers who are good in their subject, even if they don't have the skill, will remain. The teachers who are not good in their subject but have these online skills will also remain. But teachers who are not good in their subjects and do not have good online skills, may suffer. And similarly, that space will be available to the new entrants to then pitch in and do things for themselves and also for the community. So very challenging, but lots of opportunities.
Thank you, Sanjay. Over to you, Ketan. You touched upon the skilling and the entrepreneurship. So,
Yes.
yeah.
Thank you, Levit. I just want to acknowledge Vincent's point. I think long back in my Cambridge days, Vincent, I had opportunity to meet Jack Lang, and I think you're exactly doing the same thing, which Raspberry Pi can create wonders in the school. So hats off to your work. And I think Sanjay has already spoken all the points related to teachers and the dilemmas which sectors will provide opportunities to edutainment. I just wanted to add a few things for all the budding entrepreneurs there. A few years back, if you would have asked teachers to record their class and share it with the students, I think they would have been hesitant enough to do that. But now technology has made them do that. At the same time, parents have started listening to their recorded lectures of what happened in the school, and they are able to provide the feedback about that. Oh, is that what the teachers teach you, and is that something happening in the school? Perhaps that's coming for the technology parents, but the challenge remains for the rural villages, rural schools. Will mobile penetration increase? Can government give smartphones to everyone? Will Doordarshan start new channels related to class for each one of them through reaching to mobile or laptop, through Doordarshan or radio? I think that is something which we'll need to see. One opportunity which I certainly feel for all of them is having a local kind of a LinkedIn, where migrant laborers are searching for jobs and opportunities, household workers are searching for opportunities, teachers are searching for opportunities. So having a localized LinkedIn, not high-tech West LinkedIn, I'm saying, but just to relevant them with the solutions, could be an opportunity for each of the district, village, say. Currently, we have unemployment exchanges across everywhere, but how can we have employment exchanges which can really work for the local solutions? That is something which we will have to work upon, and that's a big opportunity for all the education sector. The other thing is, of course, CSR funds will dry up because most of them will go to the central depository of PM Cares, or will go to other initiatives related to healthcare and so on. So education sector may suffer in terms of impact funding for this particular year, but people will slowly realize that to address the other problems related to COVID, education is also important, and so it will revive, but it may take certain time. So at this moment of time, certain funds may not be available. So don't get demotivated that funds will dry up or something like that. At the other point of time is the infrastructure of technology in schools. I think some kind of funding, if is available to schools to upgrade their IT infrastructure, and some government scheme comes where they will be forced to do that. I think that will also enable a lot of innovations. Like Vincent said, ATL is a quite expensive solution as compared, but ATL has created certain kind of thinking for related to science education for the schools who got government funding perhaps. So if government can bring in infrastructure related to technology, that can also open a lot of opportunities for the funding sector. Other thing is unrestricted funds. I think all these education entrepreneurs, they need unrestricted funds to innovate and make things happen. So moment you will say, I have a model, it costs per beneficiary this, per school this, I think then you get restricted and then you're not able to innovate beyond that. So something where you get unrestricted funds, where you can innovate and get that rolling will be also critical for all of you. Initial customers would be challenging. That's for any business to get it. But once you get that, I think then there is a whole lot of bunch of opportunities available to it. One last disclaimer is also what happens to the Chinese investments in education startups. And if they boycott the Chinese education startups related to edtech, then there is another opportunity which is coming for the edutainment sector. So with that, I would like to close, Leave it. Thank you.
Thank you, Ketan. That was a good insight. Ketan, do you touched upon like where can we, and it's a very interesting piece, the innovation piece, and this topic was all about the innovations, right? So can you touch upon like some access avenues actually which, aspiring entrepreneurs can, go to, where they can get those unrestricted funds? It can be as simple as a small seed fund grants, but which they can use it or leverage for innovations.
I think somewhere, I think the best way to get unstructured funding is individual contribution. Someone who believes in your idea, someone who you can sell your idea, and someone who can understand that you're really passionate to do it. That's the first one to look at, because all structured fundings would have its rules and regulations and things. Fellowships like you and me, Ashoka, which focuses on stipends, to give particularly to individuals and not to organization. Those could be some of the possible opportunities which some entrepreneurs can look on. But of course, those kind of fellowships would be very limited, and that could only give you some kind of early initiator starts. But I think the best lookout is to have that one champion within your friends, network, and family who believes in you, and he puts a little bit risk on you, and then you start it and then take it to an organizational unstructured funding. There are a lot of reports related to this unstructured funding available for countries outside India because they don't have a CSR law. But here we have a law, so that unstructured funding has suddenly got into a very structured programmatic funding. So there is a little challenge for our country here for getting unstructured funds. But globally, if you see the foundations or if you see some entrepreneurial incubations, they are providing this incubation small seed funding. So it will change, but it's tough time to get unrestricted funding. Yeah, David.
Great, Ketan. On that note, we will like to take a couple of questions actually from the audience. So just let me browse through. So Malati from Kailash Satyarthi Children's Foundation. So this question is for Sanjay. So do you work in rural areas like Bihar and Jharkhand, Sanjay?
So we are closely aligned with the Bharti Foundation, and Bharti Foundation works in Haryana, Punjab mostly. They also work in Rajasthan, Tamil Nadu, and Uttar Pradesh and West Bengal, not in Bihar. So we are hoping this year that we will reach Uttar Pradesh. The places where they work are small places. So I don't know if you heard of places like, Kurian, Kalan, and Khas, etc. So these are, rural areas and will get tested severely, as these models get implemented in these rural areas. I don't think we are, thinking about it. I don't think we have thought about everything that can happen. I'm sure we will see many things as we progress this current year of journey with them.
Great. The next question is from Harsh. What is the biggest challenge in the EdTech field?
The biggest challenge is students paying the fees and teachers delivering the fees taken delivery. So if you recharge for 10 rupees of mobile, talk time is going to be 10 rupees. Here you recharge with your fees, but you don't know what's the talk time expected, or perhaps when is it going to expire also, or is it a lifetime validity? So that's the biggest challenge I think which we have in education sector.
Especially, Ketan, one more question adding to that, since there is a lot of reverse migration happening and there is a lot of actually reports coming that there will be a probability of the enrollments in the government schools would be higher, at least for the next 2 to 3 years, because parents are pulling out the children from the affordable private schools, they are going into the villages. So what is going to be the challenge to, integrate technology into the government schools, especially in the rural context?
I think challenge would be to bring technology once government decides that this will be the budget per school, and you will do it. For example, Mumbai Municipal Corporation School, the per student cost which is spent is quite higher than even affordable private schools. The question lies is how the execution will happen and how the implementation of using that technology, which Sanjay was also saying, what do you do with that computer and the presentation, how will it come, how the teacher will use it, and then finally deliver it. So teachers training would play a role for tech adoption. I think that is where we as civil society and edtech entrepreneurs will have a role. How quickly we can help teachers to get trained and use our products and services so that they feel it better to use it. And government will definitely bring in, I think, since they distribute uniform and everything else, transportation, all that thing, I think they will also be ready to give computers, technology, and everything to the schools, assuming that the budget allows that. But the real challenge will be how to use that. Or is it again, you will get uniforms after 1 year, same way you will use computer after a couple of years once those are installed. So that will be a biggest challenge.
Rightly said, the execution and implementation, and that we have seen with the cases of the Atal Tinkering Labs also. Many schools have installed it, but actually there has been not enough the human resources that could take it actually and create a value for the beneficiaries. On that note, last comments to the audience speakers. What is the key message for in this space for anyone actually who wants to be in this space, aspiring to work in either in the capacity of in the NGOs working with your organizations, or going into the CSR side of it or the philanthropic side of it? For anyone actually who is interested in the education space, one last message from all three of you. It would be great.
So please, you're welcome to this sector. Please come, but also come up with a pinch of salt that this is not all totally valuation the day one. Valuation will come later. I think first we'll have to solve the problem, and then slowly valuation will come. So what kind of valuation will be there? If that is the first question in your mind, I think then you probably have to rethink that whether education is the right sector or not. So with that, these are my comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Ketan. Over to you, Vincent.
Yeah, thanks, Levitt. I think my comment is, leaving the human cost aside and the suffering it is causing, this current COVID crisis that we have is a great opportunity for the EdTech sector to innovate and create solutions that haven't happened so far.